Welcome. My name is Patricia Fitzgerald, and I have the absolute pleasure of sitting here with Brandon Fouché, renowned dog behaviorist, aggression specialist, here at the Brandon Fouché Rehabilitation Center. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I'm here today because about a month ago I came across a study that I found interesting, and I wanted Brandon's take on it. It was a study that I found in Science magazine, and it was a study involving wolves and dogs and the idea of dominance and submission and hierarchies, which I know Brandon speaks a lot about, so I was very interested in hearing his take on the study. So I'm going to just summarize what I saw in Science magazine, the August 2014 edition. So here we are just a month later looking at it. For dog lovers, comparative psychologists Frederick Range and Zofia Varani have an unsettling conclusion. That already sounds interesting.
Of course.
That's what I thought with the first sentence. Many researchers think that as humans domesticated wolves, they selected for a cooperative nature, resulting in animals keen to pitch in on tasks with humans. Like, I would love for my dog to be able to learn how to clean my house, but instead my dog watches me clean my house and is not keen to pitch in on a task. But when the two scientists at the Merkley Research Institute at the University of Vet Medicine in Vienna studied lab-raised dog and wolf packs, they found that wolves were the tolerant, cooperative ones. The dogs, in contrast, form strict, linear dominance hierarchies that demand obedience from subordinates. Range explained at the Animal Behavior Society meeting at Princeton University. Basically, Range and her colleagues tested the dogs' and wolves' tolerance for their fellow pack members with a mealtime challenge. The researchers paired a high-ranking dog with a low-ranking pack buddy and set out a bowl of food. Then gave the same challenge to a pair of wolves. In every matchup, the higher-ranking dog monopolized the food, Range told the meeting. But in the wolf tests, both high-ranking and low-ranking animals had access and were able to chow down at the same time. At times, the more dominant wolves were mildly aggressive toward their subordinates, but a lower-ranking dog won't even try when paired with a top dog. They do not dare to challenge. The wolves also beat the hounds on the test that assessed whether the dogs were able to follow the gaze of their fellows to find food. They are very cooperative with each other, and when they have a disagreement or must make a group decision, they have a lot of communication or talk first. So the wolves had a lot of communication and talk amongst themselves, as they say, right?
Right.
But the same was not true for the center's dog packs. For even the smallest transgression, a higher-ranking dog, quote, may react aggressively, end quote, towards one that is subordinate. Range and Varani suspect that the relationship between dogs and humans is hierarchical, with humans as top dogs rather than cooperative, as in wolf packs. The notion of dog-human cooperation needs to be reconsidered, Range said, as well as the hypothesis that domestication enhanced dogs' cooperative ability. So what they're saying is that we might think that because we domesticated dogs, we've enhanced the cooperative abilities, but it looks like this study might suggest something else. Instead, our ancestors bred dogs for obedience and dependency. It's not about having a common goal, Range said. It's about being with us, but without conflict. We tell them something and they obey. It's wonderful work, says James Serpell, an ethologist at the University of Pennsylvania. But it's not what the dog training community wants to hear. You can't say the word dominance around them. Does dominance exist as a phenomena in dogs? The answer is clearly yes, Serpell says. So, I can't wait to hear your response on that, since you're the expert.
You know, I've been talking for many years about cooperation with dogs and people, and I believe that dogs are really wolves in dogs' clothing. And I believe that most of the problem that we have with our dogs is not necessarily genetic. I mean, what a dog is born with is what they're born with. I think that is what they do with that genetic predisposition to be this way or that way is where the problem comes in. And that's where we come in, because we imprint on our dogs what we emotionally feel. It's not what necessarily we say, which is related to training. We tell them to do something and we expect for them to do it, whether we understand why they don't want to do it or not. And that's called training. I believe that the cooperation aspect that they talk about between wolves and the cooperation aspect between dogs and human beings can be very successful if we first understand why dogs do what they do, rather than forcing them to do something that we want them to do. Training is actually forcing a dog to do something that they already know how to do, but they'd be doing it for a different reason. The reason that the hormone tells them what to do. That's nature. Now, the concept of discipline and domination has been misunderstood a lot by human beings. We believe that it's a bad word, but every time you turn on the nature channel, you see it happening. That's the law of nature. Nature is a dictatorship. If you don't follow, you die. That's the law. So, hierarchy is something that Mother Nature created. It's the human's job to understand what she meant by that and why that's so necessary. Dogs do not believe in equality. That's a misplaced ideology in the dog's world. Their life is based on hierarchy. That's how they see it. Dogs expect for us to think like them, and humans expect for dogs to understand what we want from them, and this is where we get in trouble. So, I'm so happy to hear this article because now they are coming to begin to understand and come to a place where I've been many years ago in actually seeing this play out. I think the reason why most people don't know about this, and this is going to be such a shock to them, is because we live in a world that has been built basically around positive reinforcement, which is something that really doesn't exist in the animal kingdom. This is something that humans made up. There are no alphas in the wild handing out treats saying good girl and good boy. I mean, they just don't do it. They don't reward for good behavior. That's something that we taught our dogs. And because they don't reward for good behavior, does that mean they practice negative reinforcement? Not at all. They simply say what they don't like. And that means everything else they like. And humans have to adopt that same concept and philosophy if we want to gain control over our dogs emotionally, hormonally. Training and positive reinforcement can work if you're doing tricks. If you're teaching your dog to roll over, high five, play dead, things like that, then I get that. But when you use it for a form of control, then it gives you a false sense of security because the hormone that the dog is in is different and stronger than the one that you're asking him to go into. So if your dog is thinking dominant, assertive, aggressive behavior, and you're telling him to sit, the hormone that the dog is in is stronger than the sit or the down hormone. So if he breaks that stay or sit and goes and becomes aggressive, then the human being loses power. And the relationship changes because we're not speaking the same. So hierarchy is something that we have to look at and say, you know, this is something that nature made. This is not a bad thing. This is not negativity. I mean, human beings dominate all the time, raising the voice, that powerful voice, and pointing the finger and looking down at a human being as well as a dog, right? And we want that submission when we do it. That's the reason that we do domination. But we seem to think that domination has to do with abuse. But we're not abusing our dogs when we do that. we think that it's a physical thing. Discipline is physical, domination is mental and emotional. Usually dogs will take that in certain order. A dog will look at you. Then they'll use their body language. Then they'll growl. And after the growl, they show their teeth and then they bite, which is the discipline. And so what they're saying is, do you recognize this? First phase, second phase, third phase? No? Okay, boom, I bite. The discipline takes place, and what happens is the one that they discipline now has a connection with the domination. In other words, they know what domination means because of the consequence of the discipline. And what I do is called consequence therapy, which is the way nature says. So the bite is different in that we want to control the dog emotionally, mentally. That's the key to working with animals. It has never been about the physical aspect of pinning dogs down and forcing them into submission. That's not the key. That's not what alphas do. They lead by strength of personality. If your personality is strong and they feel that, then domination is being performed. People have got to understand that in the world of working with dogs, and this article proves it, the hierarchy is so important for us to understand. Dogs want us to understand it. I can't tell you how many clients that I've had over the years that come back and tell me their dogs seem much happier now, that they are more dominant with them. It's not a bad word. I think that positive reinforcement now is actually turning into the bad word because people are positively reinforcing negative behaviors in their dog.
It's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned the distinguishing factor between abuse and dominance because I'm really just a person who wants to help dogs volunteering at animal shelters
Sure.
and rescues.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a professional, but I love to research and think, what's working, what's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly there are dogs being killed in shelters for behavioral reasons, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking for solutions. And when I met you and you explained the difference and the understanding about dominance, I've continued over the years since I've known you to read a lot about, when I read about dominance, it talks about it as outdated and abusive, etc. And it seems that the writers that I've read aren't really understanding dominance. And also the difference, I have children and animals, and when you discipline them in a way that you're coming from a place of what's good for them, you're not in an angry, abusive place yelling at them. You're in a place where you're doing what's best for them by giving them a discipline. Like when you tell your kid, no, you're not going to the movies as a consequence for X behavior that I told you
Absolutely.
to not do. Then if you let them get away with it, what have you created? A disaster.
Yeah.
So at the time when you don't let them go to the movies, yeah, you kind of feel bad and you want to let them go, but you can't give in to supporting behaviors that are not good for them. And so you're the expert at understanding the behavioral levels of dogs. And as humans, it's so important for us to learn what's best for the dog and not take their behavior personally and try to get them to love us. Like, I know as a parent, it's so easy to give in because you want your child to like you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really take the higher road and go, they're teenagers. They might not like me right now, but I need to do what's best for them, even if I'm not being popular right now.
You can't be a friend. You have to be a mom.
Right.
Right? You got to be a dad.
Right.
And it's really interesting that in dealing with this concept of positive reinforcement, I deal with a lot of dogs that come in that have aggression problems, aggressive to people, aggressive to other dogs. And, I always say that dog at one time was a puppy that didn't have problems. Somewhere along the way, the aggression kicked in. So when I talk to people that have a dog that they had since a puppy and he's aggressive, and I ask them, what is the behavior? How do you live with the dog? What do you do? And if there's no history of abuse or anything like that, where does the aggression come from? They say all we do is love him and buy him toys and play games and treats and all of these things, and he's aggressive. We don't understand. Something's wrong with this dog. But there's nothing wrong with the dog, but the human has imprinted on the dog behaviors that we didn't really want. But we didn't realize that we were doing it because we're simply doing what society tells us to do. So what I mean by that is most people who love their dog unconditionally, they do two things. Because I love my dog so much, I'm going to buy them all the things that the toy stores carry. The problem is that the things that they purchase for the dog brings out the prey drive. So the more you love your dog, the more of the prey drive you bring out in him. Chasing, barking, digging, biting, shaking, pulling, escaping. All the things that we do in terms of exercise and all the toys are telling the dog that we want you to see life in this physical way. And then once the dog becomes a good hunter, a good chaser, he can rip the toys up really well and chew up on the Kong and take the squeaky out of the stuffed animal and tear it up, and then we now go and get toys that are indestructible that makes him go to the next level to try to destroy them because that's what he thinks you want him to do. And we run him and try to drain him physically. And that's an impossibility because dogs are built to be physical. So we're just making a better athlete out of them. We are making the endurance stronger. So now we got a stronger, faster, more determined dog that has the same problem, and then he ends up in the shelter. Exercise is overrated in the way that we do it because we're trying to physically drain the dog, which is making him a better athlete, when we should be mentally draining him because mental energy is more draining than physical energy. And I get a lot of people initially that will say, I think you're wrong. Exercise is number one. We've always heard that exercise is number one. But if we go to the jungle right now, the Serengeti jungle, you will never see animals running all over the jungle. They use that energy, they reserve it for hunting. It's genetically programmed in them. So when you wake up that hormone within your dog to become a predator, then he sees life that way because we put so much energy into it, saying that it's happiness, when it's really just excitement. And all excitement is related to the hunt, which is related to the kill. So if you're walking your dog in a way that makes them a hunter, if he's hunting, and then bring him back and give him a treat and reward him for being a good boy on the walk, when the dog is thinking, so you're rewarding me for being a hunter, then I'll hunt, I'll pull, I'll lunge, I'll do all the things that you've been telling me to do that you didn't think that you were telling me to do. And so now that we have created this megalomaniac, and I call him that because that's what, when we have a megalomaniac, we put him in prison and we end up killing him or destroying him, right? So we create this in our dog, and then we step out of that equation and point our fingers at him and say something's wrong with that dog. So that person comes in to my place with that kind of dog that they have created. It's like a potter who makes a pot, and then he curses the pot because he doesn't like the way it was made. When they show up and they say, hey, this is what we got, in order to fix that dog, we're going to have to change the way we think, because positive reinforcement, love, and affection created that thing, right? So there was a saying, a very famous person, Einstein, said that you cannot fix problems with the same level of consciousness that created them. So when people say, I want to train this out of my dog with positive reinforcement, that's what created it. So we're going to have a paradigm shift in our thinking and say, well, what do I need to do? And that's where hierarchy, discipline, domination comes in to replace where that dog is. So if you take that from him, you have to put something in the place of that. That's where the consequence therapy is. So now we want to say, that's not important, what I taught you to do. And we want to switch it and change it. And that's what this article is talking about. They're saying that we now made a mistake.
Right, they're reconsidering, looking at what they've been looking at.
Absolutely. You know,
right.
They are now at a point where I've been many years ago, and I'm so happy to hear this, but now people are going to have to start getting on board, having that open mind and say, you know, with all of the positive reinforcement that we're doing, why are we still having aggression? Why are we killing dogs? Something's missing here. The balance is not there. And I'm going to say this is what it is. Until we stop thinking positive and negative reinforcement, because it's not positive or negative, right? It's nature. Until we stop doing that, we're going to be stuck on these words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
It seems like what you might be saying is a lot of people are fixated on the techniques as opposed to the beingness or the
right.
awareness, increasing the awareness.
Yeah, well, I have people ask me all the time, what do I do?
Right.
Right? And that's the problem. We've been doing too much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's time to be a certain way.
Right.
And I know that may sound like, you know, we're going to become something higher and, you know, being, look, we need
right.
to be able to express the strength of our personality, you know. We need to be believable to our dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Our dogs expect for us to think like
they
them.
know when we mean it and when we don't mean it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we have to tell our dogs what we don't like. Stop telling them what you like. That does not work in the wild. It actually confuses the dog. When you're dealing with trying to control your dog, you know, we spend an awful lot of time practicing and producing positive reinforcement.
Right. So it's interesting, the whole idea of looking at hierarchy, because one of the most challenging areas for any layperson or professional dog trainer seems to be the dog-on-dog aggression specifically, which is your specialty. So a lot of times I hear you say you want to set the dog up to fail, which you can explain it, but from what I have observed, it's you're letting the dog go into the situation rather than avoiding it. Because I know for myself, I don't feel the confidence, needless to say, like that you do. I mean, that's, yeah. Okay, so sure, I don't have the professional experience to be able to let dogs who have aggressive tendencies work it out together, or I wouldn't know how to work with that, but you do. So a lot of times I've heard other people just have their dogs avoid other dogs, or they're getting up at 4 a.m. to walk their dogs to avoid, when it seems like understanding and being able to observe the hierarchy and observe how they discipline each other, which you get to see that every day for the past almost 30 years.
Yes.
And really most trainers or lay people, unless they actually live with a pack of dogs, they're not going to be able to observe nature. We don't really actually have many opportunities to learn to observe this natural hierarchy that you actually live with.
Yeah, it's a reality. You know, it's real. You know, when we look at the behavior of dogs and we talk about the hierarchy, nature intended animals to experience danger so that they know what to stay away from. The human practice thinks about liability, so they prevent dogs from experiencing things that could be potentially dangerous. So right there we have a problem because we're going against nature. And so when we use training, in my experience, training is restrictive work. We restrict a dog from moving forward to socialize and experience danger so that they know what to stay away from. And so because we do that, I call it learned helplessness. Because what the dog is learning by not socializing is actually causing him to go into an area where he has a problem. learned helplessness.
Right. He doesn't learn the skills how to handle conflict,
yeah,
right?
Because what he's learning is not helping him.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So when I talk about setting dogs up to fail, I'm talking about producing the problem that I have the answers to. I create the scenario rather than wait to be trapped within a scenario.
I just had an interesting analogy. My stepson starts college tomorrow as a freshman, right? So, he's off to college. Can we control his behavior? No, he's going to have to learn what he's going to learn in college. And, kids sometimes get into trouble in college or they party too much and they have to figure out the study balancing, whatever they're going to figure out, right?
Yeah.
So you hope that you give them the good foundation and let them go. Now with dogs, since they live with us continually, they don't go off to college, they don't go to the Montessori schools, they don't go off to, they might go to doggy daycare, right? But in a perfect world, it would be awesome if they did spend time in packs or went off to your rehabilitation center for daycare or something, so they could be among a professional who could guide them in their learning, right? To learn how to handle discipline, to learn how to grow through it, because as humans, we're not equipped to know how to manage that, so we could tend to be overprotective to our dogs. Like, as a culture, we've kind of been told we're a little overprotective of our children anyway. So it sounds like every dog really needs to experience a pack and a strong leader in the pack to be able to, actually have their brain have the experience to work through things in a safe way with someone who can guide them safely.
Yeah, I mean, they are experiments that are controlled. That's what I do here.
Right.
Where we can produce danger, because danger is real, right? Fear is a choice, okay? And most of the problems that we have with dogs that have aggressive problems have to do with fear. So how do they relate to fear? Their first experience with that, of course, is during the fear imprint period and socialization period. And that's when they're with us, so they're not really experiencing it the way they're supposed to, because we keep them away from dogs, usually until after the socialization period. Mm-hmm. So we imprint on them our fears.
Right.
Okay?
Absolutely. Right.
Because whatever we do to a dog, however we interact with them, they say, how do I apply this to my world? My world that we create for them. So they are going to school, they are going to college, they're in our school, our college. Well, what are we teaching them?
It's like bad homeschooling.
There we go. Exactly. Because we're operating out of fear.
Right.
We've never been taught how to work with fear, what to do when you're afraid, when your dog is doing this or doing that. And if you know what to do when you're afraid, then that means that you know why your dog is acting that way.
Right.
You will know. And so it's going to require that we understand and think from the concept of nature to be able to produce a situation or to produce a problem that we have the answers to. That's the key to working with dogs. It's called consequence therapy. They must experience something that they decide that they are no longer interested in. We need to be able to produce that
like
for
they
them.
do in the wild, like they do
Like
naturally.
they do in the wild.
Right.
You know, in the jungle, they live on the same piece of land. They separate themselves. Why? Because of consequences.
Right. So this study is really breaking some ground to have us kind of reconsider how we're handling our dogs and ourselves.
Yeah.
And to start looking a little deeper into nature and get some ideas about more clarity on dominance. Thanks for clearing up some of the misconceptions, because I sometimes don't understand it. Read a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah, dominance, discipline dominance. I mean, we can't discuss and understand it in one sitting, because it's multi-layered.
That's a separate episode.
Yeah, it's like trying to say, well, this dog is aggressive. Well, it's not enough to say that, because there are many types of aggression.
Right.
You know.
Sure.
And this should open the doors for a dialogue to talk about where we want to be and where we are now with what we've learned.
Right. Well, I know that you're going to be having a seminar in the new year, 2015, probably in February.
Absolutely.
So we'll have several hours. People
Yeah.
can ask questions. Start thinking of your questions now.
Yeah, this will be a long seminar.
Right, because everyone has questions.
We want to get them all in. It's about
Yeah,
questions.
so
If
we'll
you got
put-
questions and you get the questions answered,
Right.
or you can get them in, then you can help a dog.
I think of you as the hacker of dog behavior
Oh,
because now in the blogosphere, hacking meaning getting to the bottom of it quickly, like let's not waste time,
That's
whether
right.
it's health, etc.
Yeah,
Seems to be what you see a lot in the blogs of like how to hack your house cleaning, how to hack your health.
that's perfect. It
So
has to be that
it's
way.
like let's just get to the point
Right.
and help these dogs live better lives, but most importantly, at least live and not be killed in shelters, and have people be able to enjoy their dogs and not live in fear. So
Absolutely.
I can't wait to see you at the seminar.
Well, I can't
And-
wait to do it, and I can't wait to have everyone come and ask questions and be a part of understanding how dogs think.
Great. So we'll see you all in February at the seminar.
Bye.
Welcome. My name is Patricia Fitzgerald, and I have the absolute pleasure of sitting here with Brandon Fouché, renowned dog behaviorist, aggression specialist, here at the Brandon Fouché Rehabilitation Center. How are you doing,
I'm
Brandon?
doing great. And yourself?
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I'm here today because about a month ago I came across a study that I found interesting, and I wanted Brandon's take on it. It was a study that I found in Science magazine, and it was a study involving wolves and dogs and the idea of dominance and submission and hierarchies, which I know Brandon speaks a lot about, so I was very interested in hearing his take on the study. So I'm going to just summarize what I saying was not true for the center's dog packs. For even the smallest transgression, a higher ranking dog, quote, may react aggressively, end quote, towards one that is subordinate. Range and Varani suspect that the relationship between dogs and humans is hierarchical, with humans as top dogs rather than cooperative, as in wolf packs. The notion of dog-human cooperation needs to be reconsidered, Range said, as well as the hypothesis that domestication enhanced dogs' cooperative abilities. So what they're saying is that we might think that because we domesticated dogs, we've enhanced the cooperative abilities, but it looks like this study might suggest something else. Instead, our ancestors bred dogs for obedience and dependency. But in the wolf tests, both high-ranking and low-ranking animals had access and were able to chow down at the same time. At times, the more dominant wolves were mildly aggressive toward their subordinates, but a lower-ranking dog won't even try when paired with a top dog. They do not dare to challenge. The wolves also beat the hounds on the test that assessed whether the dogs were able to follow the gaze of their fellows to find food. They are very cooperative with each other, and when they have a disagreement or must make a group decision, they have a lot of communication or talk first. So the wolves had a lot of communication or talk amongst themselves, as they say, right?
Right.
But the same vet medicine in Vienna studied lab-raised dog and wolf packs. They found that wolves were the tolerant, cooperative ones. The dogs, in contrast, form strict, linear dominance hierarchies that demand obedience from subordinates. Range explained at the Animal Behavior Society meeting at Princeton University. Basically, Range and her colleagues tested the dogs' and wolves' tolerance for their fellow pack members with the mealtime challenge. The researchers paired a high-ranking dog with a low-ranking pack buddy and set out a bowl of food. Then gave the same challenge to a pair of wolves. In every matchup, the higher-ranking dog monopolized the food, Range told the meeting. It's on Science magazine. The August 2014 edition, so here we are just a month later looking at it. For dog lovers, comparative psychologists Frederick Range and Zofia Varani have an unsettling conclusion. That already sounds interesting.
Of course.
That's what I thought with the first sentence. Many researchers think that as humans domesticated wolves, they selected for a cooperative nature, resulting in animals keen to pitch in on tasks with humans. Like, I would love for my dog to go to learn how to clean my house, but instead my dog watches me clean my house and he's not keen to pitch in on a task. But when the two scientists at the Merkley Research Institute at the University of